Hi, I'm Reggie John. Welcome to Cargo Masterminds. Global trade has been transformed repeatedly throughout history, driven by a combination of new technologies and new policy rules that unlock their power. The most significant technology that drove global trade up was containerization, and the new policy environment was the GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which later led to the creation of WTO, or World Trade Organization. The result was a dramatic drop in trade cost, a huge increase in trade, the emergence of global firms and value chains, and the integration of a vast range of countries into global economy. With the rapid penetration of high-speed internet and an accelerated pace of digitization, particularly in the last 1 year because of the pandemic, which forced individuals and establishments to use the digital platforms to stay connected and transact. In this highly digitally connected world, where does global freight, estimated to be worth $1 trillion, stand in terms of digitalization? Is the global freight industry on par with its peers when it comes to seamless digital transactions? How are companies big and small in the global freight industry beginning to standardize their data, offer a better customer experience, and thus bring cost efficiencies? How are small but deep technology companies creating cutting edge digital tools and marketplaces, employing artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big and deep data to truly change the status of international freight, one of the oldest industries? To discuss this and much more, I am delighted to have Zvi Schreiber, founder and CEO of Freightos, an 8-year-old technology company that is revolutionizing the way global freight capacity is bought and sold. Freightos is the leading digital marketplace for international shipping, both ocean and air. Thanks, Zvi, for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Reggie. Great to be here.
Zvi, first thing first, place in context the significance of the Qatar Airways cargo coming on board and the rollout in 6 countries as on Sunday, February 7th, and the significance of the world's largest cargo carrier coming on your platform. Certainly a very, very dominant platform in the industry to launch a very dynamic digital freight booking.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. So just to give this some context, you're asking about the WebCargo platform. WebCargo is an affiliated company of Freightos, which takes care of technology for service providers, freight forwarders and carriers. We work with about 2,000 freight forwarders, representing more than 30% of the world market. And one of the key initiatives that we have on WebCargo is what we call digital air cargo, DAC, digital air cargo. It's kind of equivalent in the travel world to a Sabre or an Amadeus, which are connecting the freight forwarders to the carriers in real time. And this platform, WebCargo, the digital air cargo platform, has grown tremendously during 2020. It started already in 2018 with Lufthansa. In 2019, we had Air France KLM and IAG Group joining. So we already had some big carriers. In 2020, we had Etihad and more recently Delta and others. So we've already had a lot of major, top tier carriers connected to WebCargo for digital air cargo. And we have our 2,000 forwarders, using it to place orders. So all of that was up and running and growing. Despite that, you're quite right in your question that the fact that Qatar Airways are joining is hugely significant in a few ways. First of all, they're number one. They're the biggest air cargo airline, as you said. But they're not just the biggest, they're also real leaders. The team at Qatar, led by Guillaume and Michael and Kirsten, they're real visionaries. They understand what digitization can do for air cargo. So they're really very important partners, not just in bringing their huge volume, but in bringing their vision onto the platform. One final comment, which just will give you an example maybe of what I'm saying in terms of Qatar's visionary approach. Every carrier who connects to WebCargo has a cost saving because they start to get orders in real time, fully digitally. It saves them time on call centers and human interaction, and it saves mistakes. So they all have some saving. Qatar is the first one who is really passing on that saving to their customers. So Qatar have actually announced, which is very exciting, that the best price, a discounted price will be available on web cargo. And so they're taking their saving that they get from connecting to a digital platform like web cargo, and they're passing some of that saving onto the freight forwarders. And they're the first ones to really commit to pass on part of the saving in forms of a discount. So I think that's a very exciting initiative, which will help freight forwarders to really appreciate the other benefits, as well as the other benefits of digital air cargo. They'll get a direct cost benefit as well.
Allow me to take you back about a decade back into 2011, I think. Perhaps you're an outsider as far as the freight industry is concerned, but you understood actually how backward the freight industry is, that when you were leading your previous company and you were shipping stuff from China to Europe and the US. How do you look at the evolution of the freight industry? Let's not be too proud and too happy with the way that the freight industry is evolving now. But how do you look at as somebody who developed software and technology for different industries?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, it's very gratifying to see that the vision that we had in 2012 is starting to get realized by us, by others. By the way, our roots are even before 2011, 2012, because a key part of our company is Web Cargo, which we acquired. And the founders there, Manel and Enrique, had started that already in 2008, 2009. So the roots of the company, of the Web Cargo part of the company, are even further back. I think, Reggie, you said it correctly. We shouldn't be too self-congratulatory in a way, because I always, when I talk about digital air cargo, in a way, it's inspired to some extent by what's happened in passenger travel, which has been great for everyone. It's been, not during COVID, but other than COVID, the planes have been fuller and the prices have been cheaper, and digitization has been fantastic for passenger travel. Now, the roots of digitization of passenger flying go back to 1963. That's when Sabre went live. So American Airlines was already doing some kind of electronic booking of passengers onto their planes in 1963. That's 58 years ago. And still, American Airlines are not yet fully digital with cargo. Hopefully that will very, very much hope to work with them to bring that online this year. And really, the first airline to really have an API for cargo was Lufthansa in 2018. So this industry has gotten far behind passenger travel, retail, financial technology. But it's very exciting to see that it's finally catching up. And a lot of the things that we spoke about in 2012, it took a lot of time. It's a complex industry. It's a conservative industry. There are 100,000 freight forwarders in the world. It's a very fragmented industry. There's multimodal. There's all kinds of complications because cargo doesn't walk itself onto a ship or onto an airplane. So you need a truck, and you need customs clearance, and you need trains and river barges. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of fragmentation. But it's gratifying to see that the things that we've been talking about for 8 years, or finally 9 years almost, are finally starting to happen in a very significant way.
Let us look at the aviation industry, particularly from the passenger business side. As a passenger, you are able to book your best tickets possible, check-in, board, all fully digital and seamless. You're sitting in a plane, and below your feet is the belly of the aircraft where cargo gets loaded. Remember, 50% of the global air freight capacity is in the bellies of passenger flights. But the experience for the cargo, from booking to boarding to flying, is completely different. The difference in digitalization is so different, but both are part of the same industry and part of the same organization. Do you still get frustrated at the pace of digitization in the cargo side of the aviation business?
Well, it's improved a lot because it's changing, right? So in 2018, we worked with the first carrier, with Lufthansa, so that gave us a little bit of hope, but it was one carrier. You can't really digitize an industry with one carrier. 2019, we had the IAG group, Air France KLM. It was starting to get a little bit of momentum, but still 3 carriers, all based in Europe. It wasn't yet a global effort. But in 2020, it really took off, if you'll excuse the pun. And we saw a 10x growth from the end of 2019 till the end of 2020. So it really grew 10 times in a single, the volume of electronic bookings on our platform grew 10 times in a single year. And it's going to carry on growing very, very rapidly. So, of course, it's a much better feeling when, of course, there's a long way to go, but you see the momentum that it's really, really changing.
Is that more by accident or by design? Because the pandemic happened and there was no way but to go digital.
Yes and no. I mean, that's a fair question. I think the pandemic, it was happening anyway. So to be fair to the airlines and the forwarders, like I said, we already had some electronic bookings in 2019. We already had a few airlines. So it was happening anyway, and it would have happened anyway. Having said that, I think you're quite right that the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated things for two reasons. One is that that nothing is static anymore. The flight schedules are changing every day. As airports, there's lockdown and airports open and airports close and flights are cancelled and there's quarantines and there's a lot of change. And then this passenger aircraft get converted into freighters, so suddenly there's more freight capacity. The old way where you had an Excel sheet with your flight schedule and your prices for a whole season just looks ridiculous now. I mean, that's just, even then it wasn't so ideal, by the way. It was never ideal to have static schedules and static prices for 6 months. But in the pandemic, it's completely impossible. Things are changing very, very rapidly. So that's one reason why it's getting a lot of attention. The other reason, as you'll appreciate, is that suddenly cargo has become the most profitable or the only profitable part of an airline. So you talked before about the passengers on, at the top and the cargo below the feet. But right now, the cargo deck below the feet is making more revenue than the passengers in many cases, unfortunately. And I know that many CEOs of airlines, used to see cargo as sort of very much a secondary or tertiary sort of revenue stream and gave it very little attention. And suddenly it's the most profitable part of their business. So cargo is getting a lot of attention from IT, attention from the airline management. So for those two reasons, both the dynamic nature of the industry and also the revenue potential of cargo and the high prices of cargo, yes, it's definitely accelerated things.
When you started your company, began to kind of really think about Freightos in 2011 and finally launched the company in 2012, you actually had to build up the database because there was no data really readily available, and the data that you were collecting were all of absolutely no standards. Everyone had their own set of data, how it's collected. Is that something that you think there is much better data collection and there is a much better standardization of data, and it has become easier for you to create business models for airlines and for the freight forwarding industry?
Well, yes and no. Standardization, no. There is still virtually no data standardization in the industry, but we've got around that and managed to collect data much more effectively anyway. So to give you an idea, we work with about a dozen airlines who we've integrated in real time, but no two of them have the same API, the same electronic connection. So each one was different, but we've now created a hub which translates all of that. So now a big freight forwarder or shipper who wants data from multiple airlines can get a single API, a single electronic connection from WebCargo, which allows them to talk to all the airlines. So we're creating the standard by doing all of the translation on the fly. And that's only for the ones who have digital air cargo. For all the other airlines and for many of the ocean liners and trucking, it's still Excel. So still 95% of the data coming into Freightos and into WebCargo is coming into Excel sheets and non-standard. Each Excel sheet is different. But we've made a lot of progress in creating algorithms to automatically read those Excel sheets. So the majority of Excel sheets that come into us, and it's hundreds of Excel sheets every day from all around the world, from carriers all around the world, the majority of those Excel sheets are now read fully automatically within minutes by our system and are within the database, updated in the database for the freight forwarders, for the shippers where that's relevant, within minutes. So I think there's been no progress in data standardization, but companies like Freightos and our subsidiary WebCargo have certainly applied modern technology to normalize the data, to standardize the data, even though it's the underlying data is non-standard. And the result is very good. The result is that we have a database with billions of prices, literally billions of prices for every possible route of air and ocean and rail and truck. And that's all in a fully normalized database, and a lot of it is still private, and it's segmented for just specific customers who own that data. Some of it is now public and available, but we've been very successful in normalizing the data.
Zvi, can you just tell us about, because you are a software engineer, can you tell us about also the deployment of artificial intelligence, machine learning to make sure that the data that you collect is refined using these digital tools to provide the best data available?
Yeah, so I think, like you said in your previous question, Reggie, it all starts from the data. So you can't do anything clever till you have the data. So a lot of our work was, like I said, connecting to different APIs and translating them and ingesting Excel sheets and translating them. Once you've done that, then you can run algorithms. In honesty, a lot of the stuff that needs to be done in this industry is not so complex that it needs sort of deep learning neural networks or anything like that. But certainly we run algorithms of all kinds, particularly, most importantly, the routing algorithm to actually take all the legs and find the optimal route door to door. So our routing algorithm is a key focus. All the pricing business logic is a key focus. And now, of course, also the industry data. So we publish the Freightos Baltic Index, the FBX. So we publish every day based on a huge data, that an accurate average price for shipping a 40-foot container on various trade lanes. That data is free at fbx.freightos.com. We're planning to do the same for air, to have a Freightos Air Index as well. So yeah, once you've got the data, you can apply a lot of algorithms, and nowadays with cloud computing, it's become relatively so easy and inexpensive to process massive amounts of data.
Zvi, is the ocean freight stakeholders more prone to use digitalization than the air freight industry? What has been your observation? Because you service both the mode of transport.
It's been about the same, I would say, actually. So if you think about air, there's a dozen, maybe slightly more airlines who've really got dynamic prices and electronic booking. If you look at ocean, there's a few leaders like Maersk Line and Hapag-Lloyd who've got APIs, who've got electronic connections. There's some more coming. Of course, there aren't as many ocean liners. So if you look at a proportion, maybe sort of the leading 10% of carriers or so, maybe by now 20% are digitized, both in air and in container shipping. So I think overall they're both at the same sort of stage where you've got a few leading carriers who are now digitized. They can give you a binding price, an instant price, a dynamic price, a committed voyage and transit time. So you've got the leading carriers on both air and ocean can do that. The majority of carriers still can't. But I think in both cases, both in air and in container shipping, we're past a certain tipping point. And I think all the carriers who don't yet have an API, an electronic connection with dynamic pricing, with fixed committed pricing and transit time, I think they're all working on it. So I think 2 years from now, you'll see that most cargo, air and ocean, is booked electronically with a binding dynamic price, which is how it should be.
When you talk about dynamic pricing or the live freight rates, how dynamic or how live that you can get, does it mean that there would be change in hourly or a daily basis with all variables checked to ensure that the customer is getting the best rates available on a specific route?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, many of the airlines we're connected to are now updating their prices on a fully dynamic basis, certainly daily, but in some cases, I believe hourly or more. Now, there's still some who don't. There's still one or two airlines where we have a real-time digital connection. So every time the freight forwarder searches, we are talking to the airline's computer at that second and getting a price. But with one or two airlines, we notice it's always the same price and it only doesn't change very often. And there may still be an Excel sheet behind the scenes. So even though we're querying it in real time, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're calculating the price in real time. So there are a couple of airlines like that, but not that's already the exception. Most of them have moved to truly dynamic pricing. They're at the second that the freight forwarder is searching, the airline is checking how much capacity they have left on the flight, whether they have more volume available, more weight available, what density they need to fill the plane, both from a volume and a weight perspective. And they're giving you a price which is fully dynamic and optimized, to help the airline's revenue.
Tell us about your business model that you work with your customers in particularly on the web cargo net marketplace. Is that based on a subscription model, or it's a certain percent of the value of the order that you bring on board?
So we have a couple of different platforms where we've got three sort of business units. So let me just go through them one at a time. So the web cargo platform, the digital air cargo platform, which we discussed, which is connecting the forwarders to the airlines, is completely free for the forwarders. And we get a small fee from the airlines because we're saving them the cost and the errors of manual connections. But the great news for freight forwarders, they can sign up for free. It's called Web Cargo Sky. And it's completely free for freight forwarders to use. They do need to have an IATA number to access it. That's the rules that most airlines have. And they can also access it by API. So some sophisticated forwarders have got their own systems. They don't even use our portal. They actually connect it system to system as well. And then we also have software, Web Cargo Accelerate and Web Cargo Air, which freight forwarders use to manage also their private rates and to send out quotes to do the door-to-door pricing and the quoting. So that's software as a service. That's a subscription model. Like I said, we have close to some freight forwarders use just the free service, but most of the 2,000 freight forwarders are subscribing to use the software, and they get fantastic return on investment because it makes their whole quoting process quicker and more accurate. And then we have Freightos.com, which is our site for shippers, mostly small shippers, for spot quotes. So that's sort of the equivalent of Booking.com for a shipper, for an importer or exporter. And again, there's no subscription. It's completely free. And we take a small fee from the sellers, from the freight forwarders, because we're a sales channel for them. So when we find them a customer, we take, in that case, a small percentage. Finally, the FBX data are indexes which give you the ocean prices, which are also suitable, by the way, for index-linked contracts. So you can use it as a basis for pricing. It's fully audited. FBX is free for the weekly updates, and there's a small subscription to get the daily update.
By when do you expect to launch the index for the air cargo sector?
I won't give you a date, but it will definitely be this year.
Coming to, I believe you have kind of about 100 million funding that has come into. You acquired a company in Spain, which is a web cargo, and then you acquired a company in India, which is also made into the part of the web cargo by Freightos. Tell us about how adequately you are funded, how seriously you look at to expanding your footprint in different markets. Are you looking at acquisition of companies? Tell us about the future, how that you would want Freightos to evolve.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we're expanding aggressively. This is a big market, and there's still, like we discussed earlier, still the majority of the market which is not digitized. So we're working hard on that. Our main expansion strategy is not by acquisition at this time. Those two acquisitions, which were important to us, but they were opportunistic. We weren't going out looking to make an acquisition, but we came across fantastic companies that we felt were a good fit. But yeah, we're expanding our team the whole time. We're setting up new account managers and sales in different countries. We already have very good market share in Europe, which is where Web Cargo started, in Barcelona. So in some countries in Europe, we already have 90% of the market, at least for air. But in ocean, we have less, so we're expanding. But now, big push to expand in the Americas and in Asia as well, including, like you mentioned, setting up an office in India.
Can you just tell us about the number of employees that you have right now and the number of countries that you have offices?
Yeah, well, we're a little over 200 people around the world. The biggest offices are in Jerusalem, Ramallah, Barcelona. We have offices in Shanghai and Chennai. So those are sort of the main offices. But then we also have individuals in various other countries around the world, just individuals in home offices representing us in other countries as well.
Do you intend to raise more funds?
Possibly. I mean, fortunately, we've raised a lot of money, so we're not in any hurry to do that. But I think given the size of the opportunity and given the momentum, especially on digital air cargo, which is the fastest growing part of the business, I think it would be interesting this year to raise more money just to accelerate the growth even faster. Yeah.
Zvi, my last question, what is the future for Freightos and for web cargo by Freightos? If I have to have a conversation, I'm not saying but 10 years from now, maybe like 5 years from now, what would be the kind of growth that you would expect to see in Freightos?
But let me answer it not from our sort of selfish perspective, but from the industry's perspective, right? So I certainly expect that 10 years from now, hopefully already 5 years from now, freight will be digitized, and when a shipper wants to ship something by air or by ocean, multimodal, they will always get a price quote which is transparent. So the invoice will always match the price quote. The price quote will always be specific about which voyage it's going to be on and what the transit time is on, and it will be optimized so that every time someone's shipping, they're getting the best route, the best price, the best transit time, the best carbon footprint if they want to pay attention to that. So that's our goal. Our goal is to enable that, but we're judged not by what Freightos achieves. We're judged by the industry giving a better service to the importers and exporters and helping to expand global trade.
Thanks, Zvi. It was a delight talking to you.
Thanks, Reggie.
So that was Zvi Schreiber, founder and CEO of Freightos. Thanks for joining Cargo Mastermind. Thanks once again for tuning into Cargo Masterminds. Join us next Monday for another episode with another guest.